Surprisingly, in the early days of the Premier Grand Lodge from 1717 onwards, like nowadays, being a Catholic in an English lodge was not a problem. The political manoeuvring of Protestant Hanoverians and the Catholic Jacobites was still an issue, but in lodge it did not seem to matter, as we can see from the membership of the lodge at the Horn Tavern. Both the Marquis of Mash and the Earl of Lorraine would have been Catholic. One of the more controversial Grand Masters in the early days of the Premier Grand Lodge was Thomas Howard, 8th Duke of Norfolk, who was Grand Master from 1730 to 1731. The Dukes of Norfolk were well-known Catholics. Howard's father had been part of a plot against the king in 1678, but was acquitted. However, his cousin William Howard was executed in 1680 for his part in the plot. Howard, the Grand Master, later secured the acquittal of his brother Edward on the charge of high treason for being involved in the Jacobite Rising of 1715. Then Howard himself was arrested on suspicion of involvement in the Jacobite Atterbury plot during the general election of 1722 and was imprisoned briefly in the Tower of London. So how was it that Howard became Grand Master? At the time of his election as Grand Master in 1730, Howard was Earl Marshal, one of the 8 great officers of state, a powerful argument for his installation. This all changed following the Papal Bull in 1738, when it became impossible for Catholics to be installed as Grand Master. The same year, the revised constitutions of Freemasonry were published, but neither of the constitutions 1723 or 1738 were added to the Vatican's index of prohibited books. In April of 1738, Pope Clement XII had issued a papal bull In Eminenti Apostolata Specula, condemning Freemasonry, which was later confirmed in 1751 by his successor and by each pope since then. The papal bull against Freemasonry was still in force when Lord Ripon was made Grand Master in 1870. However, when he converted to Catholicism in 1874, he reluctantly had to resign as Grand Master and leave the craft at the same time. The reason for the papal bull may have been due to the machinations of Prince James, known as the Old Pretender, who was son of King James II, who had fled to France and abdicated following the Glorious Revolution, which saw the Dutch King William III become King of England. In Europe, it was evident that Freemasonry was dividing into Protestant Hanoverian lodges and Jacobite Catholic lodges, even though both lodges admitted members of any faith. But the Pope was naturally suspicious of the Protestant lodges. As the Catholic Prince James, the Old Pretender, had his court in Rome, he asked the Pope to issue a bull that would stop the expansion of Protestant lodges. James's real objective was to promote the claim of the Stuarts to the throne of Britain. But the champagne got thrown away with the cork, and Freemasonry per se became incompatible with a belief in Catholicism. In 1766, following the death of Prince James, Pope Clement XIII recognised the English Hanoverian monarchy as lawful. In England, the Popery Act of 1698, 20 years before the revival, had imposed restrictions and penalties on Catholics, which were not lifted until 1778, at which time there was widespread rioting and looting leading up to the Gordon riots of 1780, the most destructive riots in the history of London. Many Catholics' homes were damaged and at least 280 rioters were killed. 100 years after the bloodless, glorious revolution, passions against the Catholics still ran high. With the Roman Catholic Relief Act in 1829, nearly 400 years after the Act of Supremacy in 1435, Catholics in England had their rights restored. Thank you.